Hello everyone, welcome to week 2 of World Regional Geography. I hope that you've been able to take the first week to get acquainted with the Carmen site, find the resources that you need, get introduced to your group members, and hopefully formulate a discussion post. I had a lot of questions from folks trying to kind of streamline what exactly their expectations were for the first week. So one of the things that I'm going to add is a checklist feature on Carmen that will give you a concise list of everything that you need to take care of each week as we move forward. Hopefully, now that you've got the first week under your belt, you have a little bit better idea of what sort of things that we'll be doing and how to use the resources for the course. As we go forward, each week is going to consist of a new module that has a different focus. There'll often be an activity that you'll be asked to complete that has a corresponding quiz on Carmen, and then a discussion topic that your group will be expected to come up with a conclusion post regarding that. So hopefully all of you begin to get the hang of that as we go forward through the quarter. Feel free, again, to have it. If you have any questions or concerns, to contact myself, Chris, or Xining. I'm more than happy to talk to you, and I will be available through my Carmen office hours that are on campus. I'll be available via the chat function in Carmen, via chat or Google Voice, and then I'm also going to open an Adobe Connect room that I'll provide a link to, so you'll be able to log in and talk to me that way as well, or by appointment if when I'm available doesn't work with your life schedule. One of the things that I want to do today is, now that you've gotten a chance to look at the reading by Cresswell on understanding some of the big concepts in geography such as place, space, and landscape, I want to try to define geography and look at some of the other concepts that we might be using throughout this quarter. So first, to think about what geography is. Geography often is confused by people. They often think it's geology, which is the study of rocks, but geography means earth writing. And so geographers are interested in where things are located in the world, why they're there, and how places relate to each other. So an important definition of geography that I like to use is by this fellow called Isaac Bowman, and the definition is: geography tells what is where, why, and what of it. So pretty straightforward, but the key aspect there is where things are located. Another definition of geography calls it a science that deals with the earth and its life, especially the description of land, sea, air, the distribution of plant and animal life, including man and his industries, with reference to the mutual relations of these diverse elements. Wow, so pretty much everything. You can see that this is a very broad discipline, but one of the key aspects of it, again, is where things are located and the relationship between those different types of things. So when we look at geography, there's sort of 3 key elements that are foundational to understanding it. First is the spatial variation of phenomena over the surface of the earth. So again, where things are located. A second focus is on the ecological relationships between humans and the environment. And a third is a focus on particular places, often talked about through the idea of regions, which we'll focus on a lot since this is World Regional Geography. So thinking about the importance of geography, geographic study will hopefully give us a chance to appreciate the variety of people and places throughout the world, to understand relationships between different communities in the world, and help with regional, national, and global development. This image kind of gives you a sense of all the different aspects within geography. As we defined geography earlier, it was a very, very broad discipline. And so within this graphic, you can see geography broken down into a couple different realms. We have physical geography, which focuses on the physical environment, human geography, which looks at human social systems, and geographic techniques, which might be things like mapping, GIS. If you look here, hopefully you'll find some sort of overlap with some of the tools and skills that you need in whatever job it is that you do, or whatever it is you happen to be studying. Within the last 5 years or so, a lot of folks have talked about this notion of a spatial turn. This is the idea of more and more folks finding the importance of space and place as key to understanding different problems and trying to find solutions that fit into local contexts. One of the key things then in the spatial turn is access and ability for people to use tools for spatial analysis. And hopefully we're able to build your spatial analysis toolkit as we go throughout the quarter. So what do geographers actually do? Well, we can look at how geographers use different skills to think geographically. So first we want to understand how to ask geographic questions, where things are located, how did they come to be where they are, and why are they important, and then understanding the relationships between these different types of things. Next, we want to think about what sort of information geographers use. So data about locations, looking at the human and physical characteristics of different locations, and then trying to understand the conditions and activities of people who live in these places. Some of the images that you see on this page are images from field work that's been undertaken by Ohio State geographers. So on the top left, we have field work in southeastern Ohio, trying to understand the distributions of forests. Below that, we have physical geographers who have drilled out the core from the bottom of a lake to try to analyze that and see what sort of changes have occurred in climate over time. To the top right in this picture, we have an Ohio State geographer who's interviewing a fellow down in Mexico about different sort of political movements in that area. And then below that, we have an image that an Ohio State geographer took during her field work in the rainforests in South America, trying to understand the relationships between indigenous people and resource extracting companies such as oil developers. Next, once geographers have gathered this information, they can organize it in a variety of ways. One of the key ones that geographers use is visually organizing information into maps, geographic information systems like you heard about in the video that you watched in the first week, graphs, other types of visual representations. Also, geographers use a lot of written forms of representation, writing up interviews, reports, articles, things like that. Now, to analyze this information, geographers often look for patterns and different processes that are revealed in the information that they've gathered. They bring together what they've found and try to sort of synthesize various explanations. Once we get to the point of answering these geographic questions, we can make inferences based on the information that we've organized. We can try to distinguish different generalizations from the information that we found and where these generalizations might apply and where they don't. And then often new questions emerge from these conclusions. So now that we have a sense of what geographers might do, I want to elaborate a little bit on some of the tools and concepts that are important in geography. In the Cresswell reading, we talked about, or we were introduced to ideas of place, space, and landscape, which are very important key ideas in geography. So one of the things I want to ask you to do is, now you have these definitions, to try to be able to come up with your own examples of how to apply these concepts. So a place, a space, a landscape. Now to move beyond that, here's a few other concepts that are going to be important going forward. The first is the idea of maps. Now, this is a pretty straightforward concept. A lot of us use maps in our everyday lives, whether it's the old-fashioned paper maps or virtual maps that are on our smartphones or on our GPS, those sorts of things. We can think about a map as a graphical representation of a cultural or physical environment. Now, here's a couple examples of map images. The one on the left is quite obviously an artistic representation and not very useful if you were trying to find your way around Brooklyn. The one on the right is a historic representation of people's initial contact with the African continent and what they thought the geography of Africa looked like at that time, what sorts of resources people found important there. The process of making maps is called cartography, and it can be thought of as both a science and an art of map making. So what goes into that is the collection of data to try to understand where things are located, what is where, and then a process of designing maps and actually making the construction of maps. This used to be a lot more difficult process before we had computer technology to be able to make maps on a sort of cheap mass scale. Now, there's a lot of different ways that we use maps, whether they're the physical maps or virtual maps. Wayfinding is very important, getting us from one place to another. Government and tourist maps let us know where resources are. They also sort of make claims for space. A lot of us think about, say, the country that we're from, and we imagine an image based on a map of what that looks like. Also, tourist maps tell us what sort of features we might want to visit in a particular place. And then we also use a lot of virtual maps, and this kind of links back to the video that we watched last week. So things like geographic information systems for map representations, GPS global positioning systems in our phones, in our cars, telling us where we're going. And then we also use virtual maps such as video game maps that sort of put us into a virtual world and help us find our way there. One of the important things to keep in mind with maps is that they're made by people, so they're a social construction, and what goes into them then are the social relations that people have, all their biases, all their flaws go into map making. So you shouldn't think of them as sort of an objective reality, but a process that's been made by human hands. And as I said, historically, the process of map making was often something that very few people had the power and the technology to do. So it was often something that was controlled by elites and often used to take control of space. So, for example, drawing a line on a map and saying that this area belongs to your country when there's plenty of other people there that would disagree is a sort of act of claiming space through map making. Also, maps have been used for things like surveillance. So being able to tell giving sort of spatial information on what resources are available in a place so outsiders can come in and be able to extract those resources. Maps are also really important about telling you where you can and can't be. And we often grow up with particular map visualizations that we see over and over again. This one pictured here that's also shown in your book is maybe a different way than you're used to envisioning the world. Rather than seeing Europe in the center and a sort of North Pole, South Pole projection, this map uses the North Pole as the center, and you see the continents spread around that. So a different way of seeing the world. And with this different way, you can understand Asia and North America as being perhaps much closer to each other than you would with the typical map projection you might be used to seeing. Another example of how we might use map visualizations and represent the same thing in different ways is this map of the 2008 presidential election. We have the different states represented as red and blue depending on whether the voters went for Republicans or Democrats in the majority. And so with this, you see kind of a stark distinction between red states and blue states. But if we move on to this next map, what they've done here is rather than have a stark red and blue delineation between states, we have a sort of purple to show a sort of gradation in the vote rather than having it go one way or the other. And you see most of the United States is really purple rather than red or blue. So thinking about maps as a social construction, there's a selection process that happens. People decide what to show, what not to show. People decide how to represent things. Also important is thinking about how money relates to map making. Businesses can make maps and use maps to try to draw people to their establishments, to target customers, things like that. And if you think about it as you use your smartphone for wayfinding, often if you search for things like food or restaurants in a particular area, The places that are going to pop up are places that have a relationship, perhaps a paid advertising relationship with the company who's doing the serving of the mapping. So maps are also important as political symbols. They create a visual image of a particular country, they establish borders, and they also sort of separate us from them and give people a sense of identity.